You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is August 11th, 2024, and this is episode 290 of Lighthearted. We have two segments today, one on a book of poetry inspired by women lighthouse keepers, and the other on one of the great maritime museums in New England, the New Bedford Whaling Museum. No co-host today, and I want to get right into the first interview. Suellen Wedmore, who had a 24-year career as a speech and language therapist, is the Poet Laureate Emerita for the coastal town of Rockport, Massachusetts. Suellen's poetry has appeared in many publications, including the Harvard Review. She was awarded first place in both the Writer's Digest rhyming and non-rhyming poem contests. She's also won first place in the Rambunctious Review annual contest and first place in the Studios of Key West Robert Frost contest. Her work has been nominated 3 times for the Pushcart Prize. Suellen's book, A Fixed White Light, was published by Downey's Press in 2022. The poems in the book enter the lives of 6 courageous and mostly forgotten female lighthouse keepers, giving readers the opportunity to experience their heroism as well as their trials in a time when they were often met with skepticism and discrimination. Let's listen to my conversation with Suellen Wedmore now. I'm speaking this afternoon with Suellen Wedmore. Suellen, of course, is a poet, lives in Rockport, Massachusetts, on Cape Ann, beautiful Cape Ann, an area that I really love, has tremendous history. And we're going to talk about a new book of poetry that Suellen has written. Thanks so much for being with me today, Suellen.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So as I just said, you live in Rockport, and of course, we're speaking on Zoom, and people listening to the podcast can't see us, but I'm wearing my Thatcher Island baseball cap in case you haven't noticed. So,
Yes.
so
Excellent.
yeah, Thatcher Island is a place that's I know near and dear to you and to me also, and I grew up not far from there, in Lynn, Massachusetts, so I
Oh,
love Cape
yes.
Ann and Rockport and Gloucester. I love the whole area. Rockport, of course, as I said, has tremendous history, and Gloucester with fishing mostly, and Rockport more with the granite industry, really.
Yes.
Hence the name Rockport, yeah. And but it's also been home to many artists and writers. So would you say, or how would you say that living in Rockport has influenced your writing?
Well, we came here from the Midwest. I was born in Illinois, but we lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota before we came here. And I was just so excited to move someplace with what I would call deep history. It seemed like in the Midwest, like where we lived, it was a suburb. Um, Nothing was more than like 40 years old. So I was really excited to come here. I knew a lot of course, the history of Boston, and I was so excited to come and see, the site of the Revolution, and then to see Cape Ann and like Thatcher Island, that the first lights was built in 1871.
Or 1771, actually. Yeah,
1771. And
yeah.
then when Maria Bray was there, 1864, around the time of the Civil War. So I was just really excited to be someplace where there was so much history. And then, of course, the fact that T.S. Eliot, lived here for a while. I think people have a real appreciation for good writing.
Yeah, such a history, and of course, artists too. But this reminded me that Rudyard Kipling, I believe, lived for a while at Annisquam Village in Gloucester. Yeah,
And then a lot of the poets, of course, Emily Dickinson lived in Amherst, and Sylvia Plath
yeah,
went to school here for a while. So
yeah.
it's a great history.
Absolutely, it's a region that's rich in those things. So you had a long career in as a speech and language therapist, and you kind of moved from that into focusing more on your poetry. I'm wondering if you think there's any connection between your poetry and the work you did as a therapist.
Well, I was a language therapist. I know in the schools particularly, we're thought of just correcting sounds, but I really appreciate the difference word choice can make and syntax in a sentence. And that's what poetry is all about, that trying to really communicate what you're really feeling.
Yeah, it seems like there would be a connection between those two things. So your husband Sid Wedmore, is a
Yes.
retired doctor and chairman of the Thatcher Island Town Committee. And I'll just reiterate for listeners who might not know, we've talked a little bit about the Thatcher Island Twin Lights off Rockport, one of the most spectacular light stations in the country, a National Historic Landmark. And as I said, your husband is chairman of the Thatcher Island Town Committee, which oversees Thatcher Island and also Straitsmouth Island Lighthouse near there. So I went out to Thatcher Island last year with Sarah McHugh, and we interviewed your husband. It was kind of a special video edition of the podcast, so that was a lot of fun. So have you yourself been involved with Thatcher Island as well?
Yes, I've been involved with my husband since the 1980s.
Mm.
We went out with Ned Cameron was there then, and Dottie and George Carroll. Like I helped on Wedmore Walk. I helped dig this great big granite boulder out of the trail so it could be mowed. And so we've been going out there every summer since then.
First time I went out there was 1989 with Ned Cameron,
Mhm.
one of the
Wonderful
founding
museum.
fathers of the Thatcher Island Association, the whole effort there, and he was great. I remember that day like it was yesterday, and I knew George and Dottie Carroll quite well too.
Yeah, they're
So
wonderful.
yeah, it's a special place. It really is. So moving on to your book, which I have a copy of right next to me here, a fixed white light. I love the title, by the way.
Oh,
That's a
thank you.
that's a great title. So what led you to write a book of poetry about women lighthouse keepers?
Well, acted with my husband as a lighthouse keeper. Every summer we've done that since we were able. And I just imagined myself, climbing that tower 3, 4 times a night, every four
Hmm.
hours in a storm. I just thought it was so heroic.
Well, two
Um,
towers actually, having
yeah,
to
the
climb the two
both
towers. Yeah.
towers. And so I began reading about it. I first read Edward Rowe Snow, which he had a little different version. It was my first version that I was caught up in. And he had Maria Bray having children. And I had to do a lot of research around that, but it looks like she didn't have children. So my first poem, I had her leaving the children back in a crib. So I so then I had to rewrite that poem. But then we went to visit the Lighthouse Museum in Rockland, Maine. And that's where I found the book Women in the Lighthouses by Clifford and Clifford.
Yeah. Women Who Kept the Lights. Yeah, it's a
Women
classic.
Who Kept the Lights. I just got enthralled with it. I read all of those. And then I was really interested in the New England women, really. And a lot of them had these really great stories. So I researched 4 more New England women lighthouse keepers. And then I wrote a poem for a contest for Studios of Key West, and it was called How to Write a Poem About a Lighthouse. And I won first prize. So I got to spend a week down in Key West. They had a woman lighthouse keeper, Barbara Maverty. So she's my final keeper. And that was really fun to be there and then find out, oh, after all, she did the same thing. Her husband had died of yellow fever, and then she became the lighthouse keeper.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just interviewed the director of the Key West Historical Society and the lighthouse there, and we talked quite a
Oh,
bit.
really?
Talked quite a bit about Barbara Maberty.
That's quite a wonderful light, but it's not as tall as the twin lights of Thatcher Island.
Well, few are in New England. I
Right.
think the only lighthouse taller than the Twin Lights, I believe, are 124 feet tall. Boone Island Light in Maine is about 130, and I think that's the only one taller than those twin lights. So, and speaking of Maria Bray, who you were talking about, who was the wife of a keeper at Thatcher Island, could you say a little bit more about who she was for people who might not know?
Yes, so they came to Thatcher Island. Her husband had fought in the Civil War and he was injured. It's not clear from the research exactly how he was injured, but he was assigned to be the keeper of the Twin Lights, Cape Ann Light Station. And that was this like the summer of 1864. And the Fresnel lens was installed about that time. So it had the beautiful Fresnel lens. And her husband, right 3 days before Christmas, the assistant keeper became ill, and Alexander, her husband, took him on a skiff back to the mainland to get help. And then, of course, a nor'easter came in. It was 3 days and 3 nights. At first, I thought it was just Maria Bray with her children that were on the island because that was Edward Rossno's story. But doing more research, she was there with her nephew, Sidney Haskell, who was 14 years old. So he would have been some help, but still, there were the two towers, 156 steps each, to be climbed 156 steps every 4 hours, 3 times a night. And she would have been responsible for that. So she really was heroic. So they kept it going for 3 days, for 3 nights. And then on Christmas Eve day, Alexander was able to see the light and he came home.
Mm-hmm.
So it really was heroic because the distance between those two lights is like two football fields.
Yeah.
And there were covers. There was a walkway with a cover, but even with the cover, it would have been cold and just really impossible. I don't know how she did it.
Yeah, I've personally climbed those two towers back to back, so I can vouch for the fact that it ain't easy. You know,
No, I don't
my
even climb one of them now.
yeah, my knees were complaining pretty loudly at the end of that. So it's absolutely amazing what she did. So it seems like, I mean, you included six women keepers. The poetry in this book is inspired by six different women keepers. Is that correct?
Yes.
But it seems like you have this special connection to Maria Bray because I guess because of her connection to Rockport, the fact that
Yes,
you
and
live
she
there.
was the first one that I became interested in. It just inspired me that all these women were so heroic and not, I mean, most of them didn't have contracts or anything, but my conclusion was that it was just important to them that they felt useful, that they were willing to continue doing this year after year after year.
I'm wondering if any of the poems in the book are actually based on things these women said or wrote in their lifetimes, or how much is your imagination, how much is based on actual writings.
Well, I didn't have anything they wrote, but I did as extensive research as I could. And so some places I did use direct quotes from them, often in the reminiscences that are at the end of the little segment about the lighthouse keeper or in the introduction.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did do notes at the back too. And with the quotes that I got, I tried to like feel their personality. Ida Lewis said, I don't know, I ain't strong. you know, you can get
Yeah.
a lot if you just feel the quote.
Yeah, yeah. I think Ida was reluctant to talk a lot about her job, but there are some good quotes and articles and things like that. Kate Walker, I think we have a little bit of stuff she said, I believe, and Abby Burgess at Matinicus Rock in Maine wrote some letters. You probably looked at her
Yes,
letters.
and I did use those letters where she talks about going out and rescuing her chickens
Hmm.
and bringing them into the tower.
One of the quotes from her from one of her letters that I always find really poignant is not long. She died at 53, as you might know. She had a brain disease, and she wrote to a friend something about, I wonder if my soul will outlive this worn out body. And she felt
Uh,
that her soul would stay with the lighthouse, basically. So very, very poignant. When you were researching and working on this book, working on these poems, is there anything that really surprised you as you researched these women?
well, what really surprised me and that I enjoyed was to see how their lives were interwoven with some of important people or history from the past. Because I had mentioned Emily Dickinson and Thomas Wentworth Higginson was her mentor and was also instrumental in her getting published after she passed away. And he spoke. They had an Ida Lewis Day in Newport on the 4th of July, and he spoke for her because she was so shy that she didn't want to speak. That's just amazing to me how he was so important to history at that time. He was such a supporter of women's rights.
Mhm.
And he did become important in the suffragette movement, which Maria Bray did also. In Key West, Barbara Maberty talked about having lunch with John Audubon.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I wrote a poem, but this was just me thinking that she might object to the way that he killed the birds and tied them up and painted them.
Yeah.
So that was kind of me. And I did admit that in the notes. I got a lot of his language from his diary, which was down there in Key West.
Hmm. Talking about Barbara Maberty talking with Audubon reminds me that Maria Bray was kind of a naturalist and botanist herself, right?
Yes. She
Yeah.
collected seaweed and she saved it. She was kind of a researcher in that area.
Yeah. It's interesting how a lot of these, both male and female lighthouse keepers, did other things besides keeping. I mean, they were busy, but especially in the winter, there was also free time. So, like Celia Thaxter, the daughter of a keeper up here off the New Hampshire seacoast, painted a lot of scenes, but also became a very famous poet and writer as
Oh,
well. So,
yes.
yeah,
Oh,
you probably know
yes.
about Celia. Yeah.
She was an editor of a paper too, Maria Bray, after,
Right. Yeah,
and a
that's right.
suffragette.
Yeah. 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 She was a fascinating woman.
Catherine Moore
Yeah.
um, had in her house, it came down through her mother's family, a painting by Peter Paul Rubens from 1600s that would be worth, I don't know, millions.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I have read that she had quite an art collection. So there's been some debate over whether they're actual originals or possibly copies. I don't think we can know for sure at this point.
Oh, well, maybe I was too easily swayed.
Well, I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm not saying it wasn't. It very well could have been. But the interesting part of that to me is that even though she never went to a day of, I don't think she went to a day of school in her life, but she had an art collection and they say quite an extensive library in her house. So she taught herself, I think, in a lot of ways. She sounds like such an interesting woman. That's Kate Moore at in Bridgeport, Connecticut, Black Rock Harbor. We're
Black
talking.
Rock, the
Yeah,
keeper of Black Rock Light, I called it.
yeah. Each one of these women in their own right is so fascinating. So you don't have to tell me if you don't want, but are you working on anything else that might be related to lighthouses in any way?
Well, I'm still really fascinated with lighthouses and I read everything I can, but I'm working on a poem now, a book of poems now that have to do really with kind of the arbitrary passage of time.
That's that sounds intriguing. Which certainly is something, the passage of time at a lighthouse is kind of different from the passage of time in New York City or something, I would say.
Right, and there's something about a lighthouse that you assume is going to be there forever, really. And in our everyday life, that's so rare.
Yeah. Compared to us, I guess so. But of course, nothing lasts forever. And we're being reminded of that with some of these storms we're having lately, some of the
Yes,
damage that's
that's
occurring.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. but comparatively, some lighthouses have lasted hundreds of years, and I think steadfastness is one of the qualities of lighthouses that appeals to people. So here's a question that might be a little vague. I hope I can make it clear. But do you think there's something about lighthouses that makes poetry an especially good, let's say, lens for looking at them? Does that make
Oh,
sense?
yes, because it has to do, I think, with kind of the human's desire for nobility and really strength. And I do think there is the feeling, although we know nothing lasts forever, there is the feeling that this is something that can really last. And the whole thing about a safety of the harbor. And there is just something so beautiful about that tower against a sky, even a stormy sky, a sunrise. There's just something inspiring about it.
I agree, and poetry is a good way of conveying that for sure. So, before we end this, I'm gonna ask you a favor. Any
Sure.
chance we could hear, if you could possibly read one or more of the poems from the book? Would that be a
Sure. I'd
possibility?
love to read my first Maria Bray poem, The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. A bitter storm had set in, and there was Maria Bray, alone on Thatcher Island with her teenage nephew, 1864. My husband stranded on the snow-blind shore. I tramp through sleet-charged days, shriek slice nights, climb 156 steps to feed an insatiable child, this one whimpering for right whale oil. The sea heaps with foam, the northeast gale white-crested as the storm that flung the shipwrecked Thatcher children like gulls' eggs against this island's granite face. I do not eat. What use is food? My world is oil and wick, scouring the sooted lantern panes. I'll not sleep until I hear above the surf Alexander's easy hello, until I can touch his face with my cracked and frost chafed hands.
It's very beautiful, and I just want to mention you referred to the shipwreck at Thatcher Island. That's where the island gets its name, right? The shipwreck of
Yes,
Anthony Thatcher and a number of family members. He lived, but I think he and his wife lived, but several children
yes.
died
So it
in the
was in
wreck.
1635,
Yeah.
and they set out to go to Marblehead from Ipswich. And he was with his cousin, Reverend Avery. And Reverend Avery had 7 children. And Thatcher, he had a new wife that from England, but they had 4 children. And of course, this storm came in because they didn't have good ways of predicting it then. And his ship was wrecked. It's called Avery's Ledge now, but near Thatcher Island. And he and his wife were washed ashore, but everyone else died out of 23 people that they were the only 2 that survived. But there is a grave on Thatcher Island that historically is thought to be one of Reverend Avery's children. So it's kind of interesting because I was out on Thatcher Island yesterday with 20 middle school girls, and I had told them the story, Thatcher's story, a couple days ago. And a lot of them were just really interested in seeing this grave. So I walked with them to like 3 different groups.
Hmm.
But I think it's because it kind of makes history real, that you can see something. There's stones, something that people tell you happened all those almost 400 years ago, and they can see it. And I just think it makes it believable. The middle school students seem to be really interested in that.
That's great. Well, it's this human drama that brings the places to life for people. So I'm glad to hear they had that interest. So any chance we could hear at least one more poem?
Well, I thought you could help me.
Okay.
This is a poem called Questions.
Yeah, I just happen to have that poem open in front of me, so I'm ready to give this a go. So shall we
Okay, so in this poem, I am imagining hearing Maria Bray respond to questions about her life.
so who's asking the questions? Not any one particular person
Not
necessarily, but
anyone, probably questions that she's heard off and on through her life.
yeah. So I will be the questioner, the person asking the questions
And I
here.
did explain before that her husband had fought in the Civil War and that he was wounded
Yes.
in 1864.
Yeah. Okay. So again, the name of the poem is Questions. Why are you on this island?
Because I am a lighthouse keeper's wife.
Why are you on this island?
A candle against the sky is pain's remedy.
Why are you on this island?
Because only a soldier's wife understands the wounds of war.
Why do you climb the tower every 4 hours?
For $950 a year, a barrel of salt pork, a peck of dried beans.
Why do you climb the light tower every 4 hours?
Marriage is four hands tending the same fire.
Why do you climb that tower every 4 hours?
Because disaster is only a gale away.
Do you love the sea?
It is a drama of 1,000 acts.
Do you love the sea?
She is a treacherous friend.
Do you love the sea?
She is fierce in vengeance, gallant in service, exacting in her splendor.
Is an island a good place to raise children?
We learn from the tern's dives the cleverness of gulls.
Is an island a good place for children?
I fear for them, for the light tower is the firstborn.
Is this island a good place for children?
In the island of my arms.
Would you choose to live on the mainland?
This island is 50 acres of story.
Do you want to move to the mainland?
Here is rhubarb, responsibility, buttercups,
Will you retire to the mainland?
to a cottage at the Atlantic's edge, my gaze toward the sea.
Beautiful. And you have a little bit more material there about Alexander and Maria Bray after that. I don't know if you want to mention that after the poem here.
Yes, I just
Mhm.
wanted to kind of let you hear the end of the story if there was an end, but they were keepers for about 5 years. When Alexander died in 1885, Maria continued to live in Gloucester, Massachusetts until age 93, where she was active in the temperance movement, became a leader of Gloucester Women's Suffrage Association, and edited a local paper.
Yeah, as we were saying before, she's just a absolutely fascinating character. So, Sue Ellen, did you have anything else you'd like to read to us?
Yes, just briefly, I'd like to conclude with what I believe would be Maria Bray's final thoughts on leaving the tower. Reminiscence. I've known nature's moods, her rage and tantrums, but 3 days and nights of howling wind proved but drill for our fight for suffrage. Prejudice as bullying as any nor'east gale.
Mm, that's a good comparison there. So I think you end each of the chapters on the different women with a reminiscence. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a nice way to kind of tie it together. So thank you so much for reading those passages, Suellen. I think people get the idea that this is just a beautiful language in the book and also a wonderful tribute to these women. So one final question for bonus points. Okay. That
All right.
question is, what have you enjoyed most about this project, about writing the poems for a fixed white light?
Well, I think because I identified with the women, and now I'm kind of following through. Like I've got a Maria Bray costume, and I read the poems, pretending, believing I was Maria Bray. So I'm continuing to hope I inspire people with her heroism.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure you are. I love that you're doing that. And it's interesting because I've talked to other people who've written books about women lighthouse keepers or any lighthouse keepers. You get that's happened to me too. You get so into the subject, you start kind of you feel a connection, a real connection to the person. And so I understand what that's all about. It's almost like you know them personally. So
Yes.
yeah. So, Suellen Wedmore, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Anybody who loves lighthouses, and/or poetry needs to get your book, A Fixed White Light. I believe it's available through all, Amazon and other online booksellers. And you
Yes,
probably
it's,
have it at some of the bookstores in the Cape Ann area as well.
I believe so, and it is available by Down East Books
Right.
website also, but it is still on Amazon. I double checked.
Okay. Yeah, but again, I'm glad you said that because it was published by Down East Books, which is a
And the
great.
bookstore in Gloucester had a few,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so they'd love to have you visit.
Yeah. Is the Toad Hall bookstore still in Rockport?
Oh, it's
No, that's
sad.
gone.
We loved the Toad Hall
I
bookstore.
love that store. I think it's been gone for quite a few years now, right?
Well, few, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I have very fond memories of that place. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
too bad.
I did
Yeah.
readings there, it's just so personal.
Yeah, well, unfortunately those old fashioned independent bookstores are fading into history, just like lighthouse keepers are fading into history.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
but again, thank you so much, Suellen. This is a real pleasure, and hope to see you and your husband again, maybe out on Thatcher Island sometime. Maybe I can see you actually performing as Maria Bray sometime. That would be a great thing
Oh,
to get on video at some point. So
oh, great.
anyway, congratulations on the book and beautiful poetry, and thanks again.
Well, thank you. It was wonderful to talk with you.
As we talked about in the interview, Suellen's husband, Sid Wedmore, is the chairman of the Thatcher Island Town Committee in Rockport, and he was interviewed for a video I shot out on Thatcher Island last year. It's been a pleasure speaking with both Suellen and Sid, and I thank them both again very much. For our next segment, we're heading down the coast of Massachusetts to New Bedford in the southeastern part of the state. The city of New Bedford developed as a whaling port in the mid-1800s. By 1823, the city surpassed Nantucket as a whaling capital. And in 1840, with the arrival of the railroad and easier access to New York and Boston, New Bedford became the wealthiest city in the world. The New Bedford Whaling Museum was established to create and foster an interest in the history of the area. Today, the museum plays a critical role as champions for whale preservation and guardians of the area's heritage and culture. From abolitionists to immigrants, merchants to whalers, seamstresses to fishermen, and artists to environmentalists, the New Bedford Whaling Museum weaves their narratives together, inviting visitors to examine complex and sometimes difficult topics that are shaped by our past, remain critical today, and inform a sustainable future. Our guest today is Melanie Correia, who is the Associate Curator of Exhibitions and Collections at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. I spoke with Melanie in person at the museum a couple of weeks ago. Let's listen to our conversation now. So I'm here at the New Bedford Whaling Museum this morning. It's great to be back. I've been here a number of times over the years, but it's been a few years, so it's really nice to be back. And I am speaking with Melanie Correia, who is the Associate Curator of Exhibitions and Collections here at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. Good morning, Melanie.
Good morning.
Thank you
Nice
for
to have
having me.
you. Yeah.
Did I get your title
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes, that's
good.
perfect.
Wanted to be sure of that. So again, it's great to be here. Thank you for hosting me here today.
Oh, thanks for coming back.
Oh, you're very welcome. I was trying to remember. I spoke here something like, I'm going to say at least 15 years ago about lighthouses.
Okay.
But it's a vague memory. It was so long ago. But I really, again.
Was it like a lecture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. love to do it again sometime.
We'll have to put you in touch with our programs people.
That'd be great. So a quick question for you before we start talking about the museum. If you could tell me where you're from and what led to your position here?
Of course. I'm actually from New Bedford.
Oh, okay.
So not very far to get here. I grew up in the city. I went to New Bedford High, which, if you're not from around here, our mascot is whalers. So, like, whaling has a big history. Yeah. So we're the New Bedford High Whalers. And so I actually started here after I graduated from college. I had an art history and an English degree, and I was started as an intern in the photo archive, which was it was really fun. It was like a really amazing sort of introductory experience into the museums, and I've stayed for a really long time.
How long is that?
So I started in 2009 actually as an intern, and then I left in about 2016 to pursue another opportunity at the Duxbury Historical Society, which is also maritime based because they're in a lot of like colonial history, which was really great. But then I came back because the museum is very special to me. So I came back in 2022. So now I've been back since then.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Yeah. So I know this is a big question. It's probably hard to answer, like in a few words or a few sentences. But can you give me kind of like the Cliff Notes version of why and how New Bedford became the whaling capital of the world in the mid-1800s?
Yes, that is, it's a very big question.
Yes, I know.
But it has a lot to actually, I think, do with our harbor. So a lot of the whaling that was happening around here in the early sort of like 17th and 18th century was offshore, which meant that as people would see whales from the shore, go out, get them, bring them back. But as whales started moving further offshore, people had to start following them. But that means that sort of as trips got longer and farther, so you're going around Cape of Good Hope or Cape Horn, the ships got bigger and more industrial. And so New Bedford has a really deep and protected harbor, which sort of facilitated that capability to have these larger ships that you could process whales on board. And then once the railroad arrived here in the 1840s, that sort of really became when New Bedford took off.
Yeah.
We had sort of easy access to New York and Boston and sort of these really large markets that we're able to send the whale oil off to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good job summarizing that.
Yeah,
yeah.
There's
true.
a lot more to it, but that's sort of really.
I know, yeah. And New Bedford was actually the richest city in the country for a while in the mid-1800s,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, specifically because of the whale oil that was coming in and out of here.
And I don't know if you realize this, but for quite a while, New Bedford supplied all the whale oil for lighthouses in the country.
Oh, I knew that we provided them, but I didn't realize it was exclusively all from New Bedford. Yeah.
So what would you say is the primary mission, or it could be more than one, missions of the New Bedford Whaling Museum?
So our mission is to ignite learning through explorations of art, history, science, and culture, rooted in the stories of people, the region, and an international seaport, which covers a lot. But we do a little bit of all of those things, which makes us really special, I think.
Yeah. I know we'll get into it in a few minutes, but I know there's also an emphasis these days on ecology and preserving the whale population, et cetera.
Yeah, a lot of the science-based stuff that we're doing now, definitely.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a few minutes. Let me ask you another question that is really big and probably hard to answer in a few words, but could you talk about some of the highlights of the museum's exhibits? Yes.
So as you mentioned, we're not a museum just on whaling because we are the Old Dartmouth Historical Society as well. So we have a number of exhibits that are permanent throughout the museum that focus on the area and the surrounding town. But that includes both pre and post whaling. But I think really some of the highlights are the Lagoda. So if anybody's ever been here or if not, we have one of the, I think, largest, if not the largest, half-scale model of a whaling ship in the museum. It's called the Lagoda. You can climb aboard it. It was purpose-built specifically for the museum in 1916. And we also have 5 whale skeletons on display in the museum, which are pretty hard to miss.
Yeah.
Very much a highlight, I think, for a lot of people. And we have 4 different species. So we have a humpback, a blue whale, a right whale, and a sperm whale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say those skeletons and the Lagoda are definitely the centerpieces.
Big highlights,
yeah, things that you
definitely.
can't miss for sure.
Yeah.
The Scrimshaw exhibit, of course, I think is really well known too. One of the best collections of Scrimshaw.
We do, yeah. So we have a sort of semi-permanent Scrimshaw gallery that's always here at the museum, and actually right now we have a special exhibition that's here through November called The Wider World in Scrimshaw, which puts our collection of Scrimshaw in conversation with carvings from across the Pacific world, which is a really fascinating topic.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, did you hear that like a couple of weeks ago there was a blue whale off Cape Ann?
No.
Yeah,
No.
Whale Watch out of Gloucester, they had a blue
No
whale.
kidding.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I heard the naturalists were crying. They were so excited.
That's great. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
awesome.
it's pretty rare in New England waters. So do you have a favorite exhibit in the museum?
No. I mean, I think that's hard. It's like picking a favorite child.
Right.
I do have favorite pieces in some of the exhibits. I really like our Energy and Enterprise exhibit, which is a post-whaling actually exhibit where we talk about what happened in New Bedford after whaling went down and how the city sort of industrialized around our textiles and millwork. A lot of sort of my favorite exhibits are the temporary ones that we do, and those tell really specific and like sort of special stories, which I think highlight really cool and interesting things that we don't tell normally, and I really like those, working on those.
Yeah. People ask me what my favorite lighthouse is, and I feel the same
Yeah.
way. It's like picking a favorite child.
I mean, it has to be a New Bedford lighthouse, I think.
I have so many favorites for
Yes,
different
that's
reasons.
fair.
I really hate to pick one. And New Bedford Palmer's Island Lighthouse in New Bedford has a fascinating. I've actually written a lot about it, and of course, probably the best known story is that the keeper who was there in the hurricane of '38, that his wife died in the hurricane, and trying to come to his aid, she was swept away, and all the buildings except the lighthouse were destroyed on the island by the hurricane.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, the key story of the local lighthouses here, but there's a lot of others as well.
Yeah.
So besides, you kind of said this a little bit with the Scrimshaw, but besides your permanent exhibits, do you have changing exhibits, special exhibits, and
Yes.
anything of note coming up?
Yes, we have 4 spaces, 4 galleries currently in the museum that sort of rotate on specific schedules. Currently, we're actually prepping for one that's being installed in September. It'll open in October by our Associate Curator of Science and Research, Bob Rocha, and it's all on natural history collection in the museum, in our permanent collection. He's found really strange and really incredible, like, sort of hidden gems that I'm really excited to put out on the floor. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, that sounds great. So what is the 3D theater all about?
Yes, that's really fun, actually. So we launched what we call our Big Blue Pictures in fall of 2022. It was the first, and I think it remains the only 3D theater on the south coast of Massachusetts. So the ability to show 3D films gives the museum a fun and immersive way to ignite learning for both children and adults alike, and allows us to bring award-winning films about our natural world to New Bedford. We're currently showing a 25-minute documentary called Ocean Odyssey on a daily basis, which is about a 3-month-old humpback whale and its migratory journey along the Australian current, which is actually the same current that they feature in Finding Nemo, which is a fun little side fact.
Oh, wow. Well, that sounds great. That theater hasn't been here that many years, has it?
So we've had the theater for a long
Right,
time.
but it hasn't been a 3D theater.
No, the 3D theater is only a couple years old.
That's what I was going to say, because
Yeah.
I don't believe it was operating as a 3D theater the last time I was
when
here
you
a
were
few
here.
years ago. Yeah.
No, so we've had the building that the theater is in, I think, since the 80s.
In fact, I believe that's where I spoke when I was like 15 to 20
Probably,
years ago
right,
when I
yeah.
spoke. I believe it was in that theater.
Yeah,
but
so
I
it was-
I was in 3D.
Right, there you go. So it's been a little bit of a 3D theater for a long time.
At least I think I was. But. So the museum also has special events, right? Could you tell me what kind of events there are?
Yes, we have a ton of really special events, and actually our programs team are like real rock stars. It runs the gamut throughout the year. We have like school vacation weeks. We have programs that are specific to exhibitions. We have sort of series that we run every year. One of my favorite big special events is the Moby Dick Marathon, which we were talking about a little bit before this. So we hold this the first weekend in January every year in honor of the day that Melville went off on his whaling voyage out of Fairhaven. And I think his was January 4th. It doesn't always happen to fall on the 4th because we have to do it over a weekend. But it's basically a 3D event where 3-day event. Did I say 3D? I have a 3D in the brain now. But it's a 3-day event where Moby Dick is read aloud straight through. The museum is open to people who are just like hanging out, listening to readers read the book for usually about 25 to 26 hours. But there's much more than that, right? So we have like a kids marathon a couple of years. We've had a Portuguese marathon that also was like live streamed to different parts of the world where other Portuguese speaking people were reading from Moby Dick. There are performances and live stream it across the world. So we have like thousands of people that tune in. It's really like, it's really special. Last year we had people, I think from as far away as Australia and China and France that came to like hang out with us for the whole weekend and read Moby Dick. I think it's like one of my favorite things that we do for sure.
Yeah, well, it's pretty well known.
Yeah.
I've certainly heard about it for a long time. How long has that been going on?
26 years, I think, we just did our 26th,
27th.
Years. Yeah. In the 20s for sure.
Yeah. That's, as you mentioned, a kids marathon. What are, the kids are reading something?
So they read like from like an abridged like kids version of Moby Dick. And it was last year. It was done in partnership with our local public library, which is really great.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I think I had the Classics Illustrated version. Of Moby
so
Dick.
it's like maybe a version of that, but like smaller, right? It's like for little kids.
Yeah. So there's also an extensive research library here. I know from experience because I did lighthouse research here quite a few years ago. I was writing a book on Massachusetts lighthouses and spent a day here going through I believe it's the Baker family of keepers at Clark's Point and then Butler Flats. There's journals and all kinds of materials related to them. So that was very valuable to me to go through,
I love to hear that.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit about what the scope of the research collection there is?
Our library collection is amazing. It's really like a hidden gem of the museum. We have, I think, everything that we cover as an institution, so everything from local history to international whaling. I think probably what we're most well known for is our whaling logbook and journal collection. We have about 2,500 currently, which is great. But we have researchers come from around the world to come and work in the library.
So is that just New Bedford whaling vessels or all over?
All over, yeah. We have primarily a lot out of New Bedford, of course, but we definitely have some from other cities across the United States.
Yeah, that's great. Is the research library open to the public to come and?
Yeah, we're open to the public. Anybody can come and make an appointment. So we have all of that on our website. It's just like a form you fill out. What do you want to see? When do you want to come? And we sort of try to accommodate that. Yeah,
that's great. That's such an important part of a place like this. So what kinds of resources are available online? Are the things people can access through the website, that sort of thing?
Yes. We've been working really hard, like institutionally, to make resources available to researchers or anyone that's curious about us. So you can search our collection online. So we do have a way to do that. You can search our permanent collection, library photos, whatever it is you're interested in by like browsing or keyword search. We also have like resources on specific collections within the museum. So if you're interested in our maps and charts or looking for specific manuscripts, or if you want to hear whale sounds, we have our Watkins Marine Mammal Sound database, which came to us from Hui. And then we also have a really great resources that we're partnered with Mystic, Seaport Museum, and the Nantucket Historical Association. Is called whalinghistory.org, which has been really wonderful because we're able to sort of collect whaling data from across all of our institution's collections. And so that covers stuff really a lot of American whaling, but also does cover stuff like British whaling and French whaling and things like that. So you can search one place about whaling history and get information from multiple resources, which is wonderful. Yeah, excellent. By the way, we are in, I guess you'd call this a meeting room here where we are. And as we were talking about whale sounds, I noticed a kid screamed out here somewhere. In case people heard that, I don't know if it came through or not, but there are people around just in case our listeners can hear. I know we're in it's a busy time of the museum, being the summer, okay. So yeah, just in case people are wondering what the babble in the background is. But. So I saw a bit on your website that you have programs for visiting school groups. Can you tell me a bit about those? Yes, our museum learning team is so great. We have 3 really great guided programs that we offer throughout the year for school field trips. One that's fairly new is geared toward younger learners, usually about kindergarten to second grade, called A Day at the Museum, where students learn what it means to be a museum and have sort of fun exploring and like what you can do in a museum, things like that. What's really fun about the field trips too is that we have sort of like bonuses that you can add on. So with the guided tours, you can also add on things like our inflatable whale, which is a 43-foot long inflatable humpback whale that you can just climb inside and see all of the internal organs. I think really kids have a lot of fun with it, and grown-ups have a lot of fun
play
with that.
Jonah, kind of.
Yeah, exactly right. But there's also like self-guided tours that school groups can take, and they can request visits to our reading room, like what we were just talking about, if you wanted to explore primary resources and things like that. So, yeah, we have a lot of really great field trips.
Yeah, I think I saw a picture of the inflatable whale on the website.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So do you lead any of those programs yourself?
No, not me. We have a really vast core of volunteers throughout the week and weekends that lead most of our school tours. And then our museum learning team will lead those too. But the docents also lead highlight tours, so it's not just for school field trips. People can come anytime and take like a docent-led tour.
Okay. Can you tell me about the high school apprenticeship program?
Yeah, that's a really special program. That was developed in about 2010, and it was really created to support the community and grow sort of like youth opportunities in town. So about 25 New Bedford area high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors participate in a sort of this really supportive learning environment. There's a 10-month program where they experience weekly guided learning with an annual curricular focus, so things like ocean conservation or climate change or digital literacy, things like that. They also benefit from professional development and counseling, like college counseling and training in public speaking. And then in the summer, there's this like 6-week summer program where they can do projects and take field trips and sort of build bonds. And then so they sort of like start in the summer, and then that lays the foundation for throughout the school year.
It's fantastic.
Yesterday, the apprentices, as part of their summer program, participated in a beach cleanup locally at Fort Tabor, which is a beach down in the south end of New Bedford.
Sure.
And they picked up 61 pounds of trash.
Good for them.
Which is, yeah, it's great.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
I love to hear stuff like that. So something else I know from personal experience is that there's an extensive gift shop here. In fact, I got here early today, and I went in there, and you might notice I'm wearing a Bedford Whaling Museum baseball cap, which will go into my baseball cap museum at home. I've actually just started putting them on hooks on the wall, so I've got, I don't know, 60 or 70.
So curation, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So besides the shop here, can people buy things online through the website?
Definitely. We have a lot of really cool stuff, as I'm sure you saw in the gift shop. We have like books and toys. Actually, the plushes that we have those like marine animals, little stuffed animals, and they're some of the softest like little toys I've ever felt.
That's perfect. I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of those
little
probably
kids,
get sold to the school groups that
I'm
come
sure, yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you, if are there any current projects, exciting projects you're involved with right now?
Yes, we always have a lot of really exciting projects happening. We had just actually talked about the apprentices for the beach cleanup, and that was actually in conjunction with a exhibit that we have opening in November called Community Blooms, which is by an artist named Katie Roden Walker, who's local to us. And so what she's doing is a community-focused and sort of community-generated immersive art installation that explores the increase in jellyfish blooms in the ocean due to the warming waters. And so she does things like participate in beach cleanups and holds these sort of like little workshops throughout the community. She's gone to schools, she's come here and done it for like AHA nights, things like that, and helps to teach people how to make these like jellyfish art pieces that then she creates into this like immersive art experience that people can come and visit. So that's going to open in November. She's been really wonderful to work with, and I'm really excited. And she's really based in the community. She's collected everybody's name who's participated in it. I think so far, last time I talked to her, she had about 150 people who had come, and so like we have photographs, and the people will be recognized who have participated in this. So it's I'm really looking forward to see how it sort of comes together ultimately. It's been, I think, about 2 years that she's been working on this.
Well, that sounds like very interesting and fun.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I have 2 final questions for you, and they're for bonus points.
Okay. Ooh,
right.
Let's see.
So get ready. I recently, I think it was in April, I attended the CAM, Council of American Maritime Museums conference in Boston.
Yes.
It was at the Constitution Museum in Boston this year. what I'm going to ask you now, I heard discussed a lot at that conference.
Right.
And the question is, what do you think is the role of a maritime museum in our society today?
Yeah, that's a big question, and I'm sure like one that's very heavily discussed at things like CAM. I think for me it has a lot to do with the people and the stories that we tell. I think being a maritime museum and being sort of based around the ocean, right? Like this is this thing that connects everybody globally. In New Bedford, whaling was such a global enterprise. We went all over, and so we have this opportunity that we can tell stories not just from here, but internationally, and like what those relationships look like. And I think for me that has a lot to do with why I love maritime museums and like this history so much.
Very good answer.
Okay, thank you.
I give you a gold star for that.
Okay, great.
That's more or less the consensus, when
okay,
people
good,
answer
because
that
I wasn't
question.
there, so I was going to say, what if
you're
I'm
right
like,
on the
not
money
against?
there for sure.
Yeah.
It's about the people, the history of the people for sure.
Yeah.
So final question for extra bonus points. What's your favorite thing about working at the New Bedford Whaling Museum? That's probably a really big question,
That's
too.
another big question. It's like asking about my favorite exhibit. There is a lot that I really love about working here. Obviously I left and came back because of how much love I have for here, for the museum, for the city. I really love the people that I work with, actually. I've made a lot of my best friends here. Starting as like an intern, I started when I was like 20. So I've really been able to grow with the institution and grow, because of the institution. But I think a lot of what drew me here before and again was the collection, like having this global collection, right? It feels very unique. And I started as an intern in the photo archive, so I actually hold a lot of love specifically for the photo collection that we have, but it's thousands of images that we have, and it spans the entire history of photography. It shows us local scenes, it shows us international scenes, and I really think it's like, that's the entire collection, right? We have science, we have history, we have weird natural history stuff, and so I think what we have here is really special, and I feel really honored to be a part of it.
I'll give you a double gold star for that for that answer. It's obviously a good fit for everybody.
Yeah.
I think you're a real asset to this place and to the city.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're very welcome. And again, this is one of the great museums in New England. For a long time, it's been one of my favorites, and people need to come here.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Lighthouse buffs might go to see the lighthouses in town here, and Ned's Point Lighthouse and Mattapoisett. There's a number not too far from here, but they need to come in here as well.
Yes.
And,
we have a really great painting actually up in our Bourne building of Palmer's Lighthouse, if you haven't seen it yet, on the way out,
okay.
If you wanted to take through there.
I think there are some views of Palmer's Island Lighthouse from this building, correct? You can see it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely from the deck.
Yeah. Well, Melanie Correia, this is a real pleasure. It's great to be back here after several years, and it's so much fun talking with you today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for coming. It's been great to have you here again.
Many thanks to Melanie Correia and also to Drew Furtado, Communications and Marketing Manager for the New Bedford Whaling Museum, for helping to facilitate the interview. Again, if you're in southeastern Massachusetts to see the lighthouses, I strongly suggest that you also visit the New Bedford Whaling Museum. Two things I want to mention before we close up shop for today. August 25th is the deadline for this year's Lighthouse Dance-Off. We are looking for people to show their spirit and creativity. No dancing ability is required. Go to uslhs.org and look under What's New for all the details. Also on Saturday, September 7th, we're having a live virtual event celebrating 40 years of the U.S. Lighthouse Society. There will be lots of special guests and surprises. The event is free, but you need to register in advance. Go to uslhs.org and look under Events. Next week's episode will feature an interview with Sean O'Connor, Executive Director of the Rose Island Lighthouse and Fort Hamilton Trust in Newport, Rhode Island. Until then, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.